Hi and welcome to 3D Print Tech Design. Today I'm going to show you how I went from 3 hours to 15 minutes printing time. So in this video I'll show you how to speed up your 3D printing. Now we will be focusing on the COVID-19 face masks or the face shields, but of course these settings apply to any other types of 3D printing and models. We will be using 3D Workston's version of the face shield created by Eric here. It's a super nice solution. It comes in different versions depending on your areas. You have for Sweden, Europe, North America. It's super easy to use. As you can see, it's very lightweight. They also have really good guides on how you can continue fine-tuning options, finding the best materials and everything like that. I'll link it down below. Since there are so many of these face shields models out there, I think it's really important to mention that you have to talk to the end users first. So even if you're printing yourself or going through someone who distributes your models, it's really important to learn what they need and what kind of expectations they have. So even if we can speed it up, it's not always the right choice. And depending on the model you have, even if there's something really cool and fast, maybe some other model has already been tested and they prefer it. So before you start printing, make sure you have talked to the end user. We'll be looking at Cura settings through BCN3D's version of Cura 3.2. This is for the BCN Sigma R19 that I'm printing on. But those settings here, they all translate to other slices as well. So if you don't find the option that I'm mentioning, please leave a comment down below and we'll, as a community, try to help you find it. So let's go ahead and start with the more traditional ways of speeding up a 3D print. So when I do any changes, I'll be showing the print speed down below so you can check that out and see how much time we're actually gaining for each maneuver. Now please note that the estimated print time in your slicer might not be correct to your machine. There's always some variations there, so if you're using some weird machine that I'm not using, you might not see the same estimations and the estimation itself might not be the real print time. Okay, let's start with the more generic ways of speeding up your print. It's some of the very natural ways and really effective. So in this scene I have the frame, it's on the bed here. In Cura here I've chosen the left extruder. I'm also changing the settings for the left one, which is important. Usually you start off with your printing profile at 0.1 millimeters because they want you to have high quality. So when I've sliced that, that means that we are up to 3 hours and 19 minutes, which is really a lot. So only by taking this to our standard quality, so if we prepare this file, we will go from 3 hours, let's say 20 minutes, down to 2 hours and 20 minutes. We already gained an hour just by changing from the standard profile. But we're gonna do much more than that. So let's start with the first thing that you can do in Cura, is that you can actually check your time specification on the number here. So if we hover over your number, you can see that we're using 4% for infill, 46% of in-walls, outer walls and skin and travel. So this is really important, and basically this is what we're going to change. But it's important to know how this affects your model, and in this case we need to retain a lot of strength, otherwise the model is not usable at all. So let's start ahead with the first thing that we can do. In this case we can use a lot of changes to the layer height. Basically if we double the layer height to 0.3 millimeters, we should almost divide the print speed by 2. So you see now we're now down to 1 hour and 60 minutes only by this change. Now it's really important to know here that I'm using 0.3 millimeters, which is possible because I have a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. And this is the maximum really for using 0.4. The rule of thumb is that if you have a nozzle size or a nozzle diameter, you can use a layer height that is equal to 3/4 of that. So 0.3 is 3/4 of 0.4. Now, if we would have some other model, in case not this one, because this is very two-dimensional, we basically only have one thickness. If we would have something more like this, or a rounded shape, you can really see how the thicker layers makes a much worse model. You get much more stepping in it and it has less details. Compared to this one that has more details, it's a much rounder, nicer shape. But again, that's like the first thing you should do, increase your layer height. And then we already saved a lot of time. So the next quite obvious thing to do is to start changing the speed value. So let's open that menu up. You can see that we have a print speed of 45 millimeters per second. 45 is quite low, but it's possible that we can speed this up for around 70 on my machine. All different 3D printers have different settings here, so make sure that you don't overdo it. A good rule of thumb is that maybe 90 millimeters is max, but let's go ahead with 80 actually. Let's go ahead and slice it. We're looking at a bit faster, but we're still at the 1 hour mark. Now remember, we're using a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, which means that we are pushing a lot of filament out, but not that much filament. When we start to change the nozzle diameter, you will see that we have to lower the speed, otherwise the volume that is melted each second is very much and hard to figure out. So when you increase your speed and nozzle size, you have to balance them together. But 80 millimeter is fine for a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. Okay, now let's talk about the shells and the infill. So these are the settings that affect the top, the bottom, and what's inside the model, and of course the shells as well. So we'll start about the shells. The standard settings are usually given in wall thickness by millimeters. I like to activate a setting so I can see the wall line count. You can do that in Cura by hovering over the cog. And then in these settings you can either search for wall line count or just tick this box. I usually do the same down here for top layers and bottom layers because I think it's easier to communicate how many layers instead of thicknesses. So for the line count, if we look at our slice here, by actually looking at layers, so these lines here are what are the shells. And these are really important in this model because you have a lot of strength going into this part of the model. I hope you can see here. This is a really crucial part of this model as well as this part. You don't want delamination, you don't want to have too little strength in this area. We can also look at the line type. So if we look at the red ones, that's the outer shell. And then if I go through here, you can see that these are the inner walls as well. So you have the outer wall, the red one, and the green ones are the extra ones. So when I say 4 walls here, you can see that we have 4 of these walls. We then have the top and the bottom layers, which are, of course, in the bottom. It's the yellow layers here that you can see. Now reduce the top and bottom layers. Let's go with 2, because it's not really important in this model how the thickness of those are, while the lines are really important because all the loads are in the lines. So I did some changes here. You can see we didn't save a lot of time. So let's go ahead and try to save some time with 1 less layer. But you can see we're starting to hit a cap here. We can't really save a lot more by going down in settings here. Let's go to 1 just to see what that does. I would not recommend printing with 1, but we are gaining a little bit more time. So we're actually reaching our maximum here. Let's go ahead and keep that on 4, but to keep the top and bottom layer. Now we can start to move to the infill and decrease that a little bit, because again, the more important strength is in the walls and not the actual infill of the model. So going down to 10% saves us a little bit of time compared to 20. It's not really gaining a lot more time. So we could change some more settings. If you really want to, you can start to do some fine-tuning here. You have the infill speed, the wall speed, outer, inner walls. So here, for example, we can see that the wall speed is really slow. So even if I change my settings for the print speed, our wall speed is very low. So let's go ahead and double that, which I think should be fine. You won't get the same finish quality, like the really nice finish, but it doesn't matter. We want to optimize for speed. So let's go ahead and slice, and you should see we're starting to gain minutes now. We're starting to creep down into very fast speed. Now, this is something that we're starting to reach the end of what you can do with the same nozzle size here. So if you want to, you can start to experiment yourself with these settings and trying to improve the inner and the wall speeds. So go ahead with 60 and see what that can do. As you can see, we're down to around 40 minutes here. Now let's go ahead and push this up to 100, which I know that a lot of printers can do. Now one of my printers are ready in the background, but you see I'm optimizing some speeds here, pushing it up to around 35. So the thing is that now we kind of reached the maximum if we're using the same nozzle. I'll be using the 0.8 millimeter just to really show you how fast we can get this done. But what you of course want to do is start to add more models. So if we move this around, maybe make a copy, multiply it by 1 extra. So it multiplied it, but it kind of moves these around. So if you want to align the models better, you have to go up to the preferences, configure Cura, and ensure that this settings is deactivated. Ensure models are kept apart. We want to do that manually. So we can take one model, we can take the other one, and we can rotate it. There we go, now we can fit 2 models. So that's one way of also speeding things up. Now again, if you have 2 models, you have more risk. But one of the even better ways, and this is a bit controversial, But one of the better ways to also speed the things up is to print this one here. They're called the stacked printing STLs. So these ones are 10 stacked, 20 stacked, and 30 stacked. So these models are meant to be printed with dissolvable resin, but there are also versions with printers that only have one extruder without dissolvable support material. Now, it's really important that you talk with your end user, because the finish between those parts might be a bit ugly, a bit rough, and you might have to do some post-processing on that. So really be sure that you can print this with good quality, but those options are there if you want to speed up your 0.4mm nozzle even more. So as I mentioned before, I went down to 50 minutes with this, and that is basically by switching the nozzle size. So not every printer is able to change the nozzle size, but in this case, this model is designed to work with up to 1mm nozzle size, and in turn layer heights of up to 0.5mm. So with my machine, I want to show you the settings I've been using. I've been getting down to 15 minutes print time, and that is by basically changing the hot end to a 0.8mm nozzle. Now again, not everyone is going to be able to melt that much plastic at once. So if you're shopping for a new nozzle, I suggest maybe going to both 0.5, 0.6 and 0.8, or even 1mm. So what really does the speed here is being able to put the layer height up to 0.6. That really helps a lot, and that is a little bit too much for some. So even if we go to 0.5, you can see that we, with these settings, are doing 16 minutes, which is totally fine. I'm also using 2 wall line counts, but as you can see, it's still doing a full thick wall here. So this is perfect for the strength of this model. So when you're doing these kind of settings, it's really important that you look at your model and that you check out what's happening with it. I accidentally moved it here, so let's slice it again. I'm also using a little bit hotter than regular. Usually this is 235. That's because I'm pushing so much material out. I want to preheat that material so it melts easier. For speeds, I'm using quite high speeds compared to regular. A stock profile for the 0.8mm nozzle is a print speed of 25mm, and I'm using 45. I'm also changing the wall speed and the outer and inner walls as well, to basically to speed things up. But these two, the layer height and the print speed, when you have this big nozzle, that's what's really doing the changes. Now, I'm not sure that my users are going to accept the 15-minute version, so please be a bit more restrictive, making sure you keep all the quality. But if you do the bend test, which is basically bending the edges out in this model, we still have a superb finish here. You have no reason of breaking the model. It's not going to happen. It's a really strong model with the 0.8mm nozzle. So take care with these settings and adapt them after your needs. Okay, so that's the basic settings of speeding up a print, or just making sure that you can print more models at once. Now remember, if you're doing experimentation on print speeds, you should always try to change one value and see how it affects your model and make sure that it actually works the way you want. If you just go full bam and change all the settings at once, you're probably gonna achieve some pretty rough and probably a lot of failed models. So a good way is to just do some changes and see what it does to your model. In this case, it took me a while to fine-tune the right settings, and I printed a few versions that did not come out as well as this one. And also, when we're talking about the face shields, make sure that you know the end user. You can't just start printing and throw them into a bin and send them to a hospital. You have to remember that these are people working like 8 or 10 hours plus every day to make sure that people are healthy. You can't deliver products that are not optimal. So I'm not going to deliver the 15-minute models unless that they accept them and think that it works for like one-time use. So you have to think about your environment. For example, if you're printing with pets at home, you should probably not do that, because the pets, it's allergic for some people, so the personnel using them might be allergic to dogs or cats. So yeah, just make sure that you know the environment you're doing the face shields for. But when it comes to 3D printing settings, as I said before, if you can't find the settings in your slicer, or if you need help speeding something up, leave a comment down below, and I or someone else will probably be able to help you. With that said, take care of each other, print with care, and I'll see you guys in the next video.